We all know that Luffy has some truly amazing transformations, but I believe he also has several forms that are extremely underrated. Forms that really show off Luffy's battle IQ and creativeness. Sadly, we've only got to see most of these once, so let's give these underrated forms the respect they deserve. Starting with one that never gets mentioned in conversations. Ultra Instinct Luffy, aka Brainless form. So basically, toward the end of the Skypiea arc, Luffy is getting jabbed up by a nail because not only does he have one of the most broken devil fruits, he also is the first person to effectively use a type of haki against Luffy before even we knew what haki was. And Nail had like a diet version of Katakuri's future shot, but it was still very impressive because he awakened it by himself, not even knowing the concept existed. He just thought it came with being a god. Luffy needed to figure out something quick, but how does he beat a guy who can predict what he is thinking? The answer is to stop thinking altogether and unlock complete brainlessness. Essentially, Luffy goes full Ultra Instinct before Goku did. Also, this form gave us a top 2 Luffy face. Next, we have to mention Water Luffy. During Luffy's second fight against the Warlord Crocodile, he is just down bad because he couldn't figure out a way to actually land a good hit on him, since Crocodile was an exceptionally talented Logia Devil Fruit user. And honestly, up until now, Luffy's main strategy was like just hit the enemy really hard. Since he didn't know how to control haki yet, he needed a, let's say, unique idea. Through a series of trial and errors, Luffy discovers that though Crocodile does have Logia powers, because he is a Sandman, he is even more susceptible to water than most Devil Fruit users. So Luffy drinks an entire barrel of water and begins shooting it at Crocodile like a super soaker. The water made Crocodile's sand solidify enough that Luffy was actually able to land a powerful Gum Gum Bazooka attack. Unfortunately, Luffy would still lose his second fight with a dripped out Sandman. But it's all these tiny evolutions in his fight IQ and his willingness to never give up that makes Luffy who he is today. But there was actually one time when Luffy was kinda somebody else, or more like 100 somebodies, bringing us to our next underrated Luffy form, Nightmare Luffy. Nightmare Luffy was a product of Gecko Moria's shadow manipulation powers. After Moria successfully steals Luffy's shadow and inserts it into the corpse of the ancient giant oars, Luffy encounters some more victims of Moria's shadow reaping, who had spent years desperately trying to figure out ways to harness the shadow fruit's abilities to benefit them in their fight against Moria. Through their countless experiments, they learned that they could capture shadows from the zombies that roamed around Thriller Bark and then insert said shadows into themselves, which allowed them to gain the abilities and skills the shadow's previous owner had. For example, the first shadow that was put into Luffy made him an elite swordsman. I would have done anything for Zoro to be able to see Luffy be this talented with a sword, but like completely out of context, and he never figured out the truth. Lola tells Luffy that though effective, whenever they tried this trick themselves, they could only handle 2 or 3 shadows, but she feels that Luffy should be able to handle about 20 or 30 since it's based on the willpower of the holder. Her and her allies are flabbergasted when they see that Luffy is able to hold all 100 shadows they had collected, transforming Luffy into his nightmare form. In this form, he was several times bigger than his normal self, roughly the same size as Moria. His skin had also turned completely blue. I think he looked so badass, but some people still skipped over Thriller Bark altogether. Skipping any canon arc in One Piece should be considered a sin. Thriller Bark had so many iconic moments and some of the funniest scenes in the entire series. On top of the Shadow's ability, he could still use all of his Gomu Gomu techniques, except now they was all super powered up. His speed and power was just off the charts. He was able to save Nami and Usopp from getting squashed so fast, Oars didn't even know Luffy was there until Luffy wanted him to. Luffy was like, what are you supposed to be stomping? Nothing is there. And then when Oars attacked him with his Gomu Gomu no rifle, Luffy blocked it with one hand and sent him flying with the other, and then proceeded to dominate him, winning right before his 10-minute time limit was up and all the shadows returned to their original users. I do wish we could have got to see a little more of the other shadows abilities. Out of 100, I bet some was really interesting. I mean, I know it's not in the manga or anime, but in the One Piece game, A Limited Cruise, Nightmare Luffy does display some other abilities he got from the shadows, such as being able to breathe 3 fireballs horizontally after drinking some liquid and proficiency with a longbow. And in which he shoots multiple flaming arrows. This next form is one you might have missed depending on how you consumed One Piece, because it's anime only, but it does actually have some canon foreshadowing. Luffy's original giant form. In the filler episode called Z's Ambition Arc, Luffy vs. Shuzo, a lead up to the One Piece film Z, Shuzo, a member of the Neo Marines group, orders his men to be launched at the island like torpedoes, sacrificing themselves for him. Yeah, the Neo Marines are not good guys. Shuzo then attacks Pan's Fry and his daughter Lily the Glutton, who had become pretty good friends of Luffy's. Luffy faces off against Shuzo, but Shuzo begins to overpower him. Lily then gets shot into Luffy's mouth by Usopp, don't tell Boa, and then she slides down Luffy's throat until she's completely inside of him, in which she activates her mini no Mi powers that allow her to change size at will. She is already normally very big since she is of the giant race, but she grows like super big. This normally would make the people go boom, but since Luffy is stretchy, he grows with her, making him extremely powerful and durable. Besides the boost thanks to his size, giants are already several times stronger than humans, so their combo form was like crazy OP. Like he gets hit in the head with a rocket, but it doesn't even phase him. He also could still use Gear Second, making him even more overpowered, where he easily starts winning the fight from here. I liked this form because when you think about it, it low-key spoiled Gear 5th way before chapter 1045. Some of the shots even looked the same, and Luffy even yelled happily that he became a giant. Plus, it actually looked pretty cool that you could see Lily's helmet poking out of Luffy's head. She was really wearing Luffy like the Jake suit from Adventure Time. I actually also really loved Lily's overall design. Before we get to the most underrated Luffy transformations, did you know you could transform that subscribe button to a subscribed button just by clicking it, allowing you to get more of the deepest dives into all things One Piece? Liking the video also helps me achieve my dream of becoming the king of One Piece YouTube. Next, we have a form we just can't skip because it's too adorable. Mini Luffy, or post third gear, is a form that Luffy would take on as a side effect of him using Gear 3rd for a long period of time, which would cause him to become physically exhausted. He then runs out of energy and begins shrinking so fast his body can't handle it, reducing him to the size of a child. There is also the consequence of being unable to move for several minutes, which was a pretty big drawback because that is a very dangerous thing to happen mid-fight, but that's one of the reasons I liked it. This added some stakes for Luffy using his trump card form, similar to how if Luffy overuses Gear 5, he goes old man. This forces him to be a smart fighter. After his 2 years training with Rayleigh, he was able to use Gear 3rd freely without the mini Luffy side effect. I really liked Tiny Luffy, and maybe since current Luffy can go giant form now, maybe he can go mini again if he wanted to. Our next form was one of the most clever, mainly because it was bred out of desperation. Champion form. Champion Luffy came about in order for him to be able to actually hit Magellan the Poison Man. Thanks to Magellan's Doku Doku no Mi, he could cover his entire body into various types of poison, and even summon a poison beast. Luffy had first-hand experience of how dangerous this ability is. The last time Magellan landed a solid attack on him was the closest he ever came to actually dying. In fact, even after Luffy was saved, he had to sacrifice years off his life in the process. So that's gonna suck in the future. Luffy had to partner up with Mr. 3, and by using his wax powers, Champion Luffy was born. Mr. 3's wax is as hard as steel when it dries. So with his new wax accessories, Luffy was able to attack Magellan without touching his poison. I thought this was very clever because, keeping it real, Magellan is like a walking funeral. And so without this form, Luffy's adventure might have ended right there. So to me, this one is goated. From goated to goatee, we have Luffy's Lucy transformation. Lucy is a version of Luffy in costume that happened in the Dressrosa arc. He needed to disguise himself so he could participate in the Coliseum tournament in order to win the prize, the Mera no Mi, but he needed to hide his identity from Doflamingo. So he conjured up a gladiator cosplay, golden helmet, red cape, and a fake beard with sunglasses to hide his face. But the best part of the Lucy form to me is that so his rubbery body wasn't exposed, he had to rely solely on his base form the entire tournament. No stretching or increasing his body size, just his speed, physical strength, and hockey. I thought it was really cool to see Luffy fight like this because we had become so accustomed to him using his gear moves to get him out of trouble. His basic fighter stats have just increased so much, it's insane. We got to see Lucy's incredible speed when he was teleporting around messing with Brutal Bull, who the commentators called the Colosseum's Grim Reaper, until Lucy flexes his Conqueror's hockey to will the beast into being his friend and ride. Lucy's insane physical strength was put on display after her Druden hurts the bull, and Lucy gets pissed off and knocks the gladiator giant out with one punch. It's a battle royale, so we get to see a lot of action, with the most intense moment being when Lucy had to face off against Don Chin Chow over a beef he had with Luffy's grandpa. Dude was actually pretty strong. We even got a Conqueror clash out of it, so that was sick. On top of all of this, Lucy mode was also responsible for so many funny moments, like when some of the contestants tried to bully the little bitty fake old man walking around, and it does not go well for them. The Lucy identity was eventually passed on to Sabo, so we get even more sweet Lucy action, but now it's Sabo dressed as Luffy with his Lucy disguise on. Maybe the Lucy outfit will be like the straw hat and get passed down through the generations to those who need it. But no outfit is as powerful as the one that makes up Luffy's next form. We have arrived at Afro Luffy. I know everyone watching this probably loves Afro Luffy. I mean, how could you not? So you are probably wondering, how could it be on this list then? That's because I believe Afro Luffy is so awesome, it deserves even more hype than it gets. Let me explain. Afro Luffy was a form assumed by Luffy during the Long Ring Longland arc, where he entered a competition called the Davy Back Fight against the Foxy Pirates. In the final event, Combat, Luffy has to fight the crew's captain, Foxy the Silver Fox. Beforehand, he got to choose what he would wear for the fight. Usopp, who was acting as his corner man, spotted a big black afro and told Luffy to wear it, claiming the afro gives him extra power and that his punches will be unstoppable. Luffy also rocked boxing shorts, boxing gloves, and showcased the flaming skull and crossbones across his chest. The fro also gave him the power to speak way more groovy, but the funk waves this form emitted are so strong that they even affected the people in the audience like Sanji. What Usopp said about the powers of the afro might not have been a lie, because we've since learned that Luffy's true power is only limited by his imagination, and Luffy is one of the few people that trust almost everything Usopp says. It's entirely possible that just by believing so, the afro did actually give him extra power and a coolness boost. We only get to see this form once in the manga, but in the anime, Afro Luffy does return in filler, when Foxy tries to get his ship and crew back and asks Luffy for help, handing over the afro, in which Luffy uses it to fight. I was cool with this because I'm down for any excuse to see more of Luffy's Bo form. In fact, could you even imagine the level of power it would have now if Afro Luffy returned while he is also in Gear 5th mode? Would the One Piece world even be able to contain so much power and funkiness? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know you should drop oranges in the comments, the word or the emoji, to let me know you made it to the very end of this video. I really appreciate it.